All right. So, what's up, everybody? Thanks for clicking this video. Thanks for tuning into my channel. My name is Simon Hill, Black American from Louisiana, coming to you live from Budapest, Hungary. Today is August 17th, 2024, about 12:47 p.m. where I'm at right now, wearing my bandana because it's 30 degrees where I'm at and it's raining outside. Y'all make it make sense. And yeah, I'm going to be drinking milk while doing this live stream like a psychopath. Mm. But it's only fitting because we're reading the book from a sociopath named Donald Trump. And this is his 2015 book, Crippled America, How to Make America Great Again. You can find this on Amazon. I do not suggest anybody buy this book, but if you really want to, you can pick it up for the humble price of only $10.49 in paperback and $24.94 in hardcover. So, in the last live stream that I did a few days ago, I think about 3 days ago, we finished the first three chapters of this book. And essentially, Trump was aggrandizing himself about how he was so successful in business, and then also talking about his immigration plan. He said he loves immigrants, he just hates illegal immigrants, and he wants to kick out all the illegal immigrants. So, yeah, we're going to be continuing today. We're going to try to read as many chapters as we can of this very poorly written book. We're starting here on chapter 4, Foreign Policy, Fighting for Peace. And I will be giving my reaction to the text as we go. So, sorry if the text is very little. If you need a copy of this book, holla at me in the comments. I can slide it to you, and you can read along for yourself or read by yourself. Continuing here. Foreign policy, fighting for peace. The career diplomats who got us into many foreign policy messes say I have no experience in foreign policy. They think that successful diplomacy requires years of experience and an understanding of all the nuances that have to be carefully considered before reaching a conclusion. Only then do these pin-stripped bureaucrats consider taking action. Look at the state of the world right now. It's a terrible mess, and that's putting it kindly. There has never been a more dangerous time. The so-called insiders within the Washington ruling class are the people who got us into this trouble. So why should we continue to pay attention to them? Some of these so-called experts are trying to scare people by saying that my approach would make the world more dangerous. More dangerous? More dangerous than what? More dangerous than where we are now? Here's what I know. What we are doing now isn't working. And years ago, when I was just starting out in business, I figured out a pretty simple approach that has always worked well for me. When you're digging yourself deeper and deeper into a hole, stop digging. My approach to foreign policy is built on a strong foundation. Operate from strength. That means we have to maintain the strongest military in the world by far. We have to demonstrate a willingness to use our economic strength to reward those countries that work with us and punish those countries that don't. That means going after the banks and financial institutions that launder money for our enemies, then move it around to facilitate terrorism. And we have to create alliances with our allies that reveal mutual benefits. If we're going to continue to be the policemen of the world, we ought to be paid for it. Teddy Roosevelt always believed we should quote unquote speak softly and carry a big stick. I've never been afraid to speak up to protect my interests, and truthfully, I don't understand why we don't speak up more loudly about the ways we are losing around the world. If we don't speak up, how is anything ever going to get better? How are we ever going to win? America is the most powerful country in the world, and we shouldn't be afraid to say it. Iron Mike Tyson, the famous fighter, once explained his philosophy saying, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. The first thing we need to do is build up our ability to throw that punch. We need to spend whatever it takes to completely fund our military properly. 15 years ago, I wrote, we can't pursue forward military and foreign policy objectives on a backward military budget. The best way not to have to use our military power is to make sure that power is visible. When people know that we will use force if necessary and that we really mean it, we'll be treated differently, with respect. Right now, no one believes us because we've been so weak with our approach to military policy in the Middle East and elsewhere. Building up our military is cheap when you consider the alternative. We're buying peace and we're locking in our national security. Right now, we are in bad shape militarily. We're decreasing the size of our forces and we're not giving them the best equipment. Recruiting the best people has fallen off and we can't get the people we have trained to the level they need to be. There are a lot of questions we have trained to the level they need to be. Sorry, there are a lot of questions about the state of our nuclear weapons. When I read reports of what is going on, I'm shocked. Okay, so my reaction to all of this, the George H.W. and the George W. Bush presidencies led us into wars in Iraq. The first Iraq war, everybody was gung ho about it. First one, televised HD, people seeing the bombs dropping live in real action, real time, and stuff like that. Then his son comes into office, George W., invades Iraq and Afghanistan after 9/11, and those go disastrously. So there is a sort of, how can I say this, malaise American people feel about us always having these foreign military interventions. Hell, this even goes back to the Vietnam era. But at the same time, you're going against the neocons who want to take us to war in the Middle East and be the world's policemen. How at the same time are you going to say we're going to continue to fund the military industrial complex? When you buy weapons, you want to use weapons. When we continue to fund the military, they're having no choice but to go to war. It's antagonistic for us to be putting our bases and soldiers and having military installations all across the planet. So of course we're going to end up being in the same place. If you're saying, Trump, in this book, that you want to take care of average working class Americans, how about instead of spending the billions of dollars on the Pentagon's black budget, where we don't know where the money goes, and they have a unlimited checkbook that they can sign for anything that they need? Why not instead defund the military and instead invest it in the US? It's sort of like counterproductive. On one hand, you're saying we need to stop getting involved in the Middle East, but at the same time, we need to continue to have more soldiers, more tanks, more warplanes, and all that sort of stuff to antagonize our enemies. It's counterproductive. All right, continuing here. It's no wonder nobody respects us. It's no surprise that we never win. Spending money on our military is also smart business. Who do people think build our airplanes and ships and all the equipment that our troops should have? American workers, that's who. So building up our military also makes economic sense because it allows us to put real money into the system and put thousands of people back to work. But instead of building the guns and tanks and bombs, you could have people build bridges, build roads, build hospitals, build schools. We could have that same sort of public works initiative that we had back in the FDR days and that sort of stuff. Instead of saying, yeah, it's good for the economy for us to be basing our entire manufacturing base on building weapons of war. We could instead invest in infrastructure. Continuing here, there is another way to pay to modernize our military forces. If other countries are depending on us to protect them, shouldn't they be willing to make sure we have the capability to do it? Shouldn't they be willing to pay for the servicemen and servicewomen and the equipment we're providing? Depending on the price of oil, Saudi Arabia earns somewhere between $500 million and $1 billion every day. They wouldn't exist, let alone have that wealth, without our protection. We get nothing from them. Nothing. We defend Germany, we defend Japan, we defend Korea. These are powerful and wealthy countries. We get nothing from them. It's time to change all of that. It's time to win again. We've got 28,500 wonderful American soldiers on South Korea's border with North Korea. They're in harm's way every single day. They're the only thing that is protecting South Korea. And what do we get from South Korea for it? They sell us products at a nice profit. They compete with us. We spent $2 trillion doing whatever we did in Iraq. I still don't know why we did it, but we did. Iraq is sitting on an ocean of oil. Is it out of line to suggest that they should contribute to their own future? And after the blood and money we spent trying to bring some semblance of stability to to the Iraqi people, maybe they should be willing to make sure we can rebuild the army that fought for them. When Kuwait was attacked by Saddam Hussein, all the wealthy Kuwaitis ran to Paris. They didn't just rent suites, they took up whole buildings, entire hotels. They lived like kings while their country was occupied. Who did they turn to for help? Who else? Uncle Sucker. That's us. We spent billions of dollars sending our army to win back Kuwait. Our people were killed and wounded, but the Iraqis went back to their country. About 2 months after the war, several Kuwaitis came up to my office to discuss a deal I wanted to do with them. Believe me, they would not have lost money on this deal. They told me, no, 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 we do not like the United States for investment purposes. We have great respect for you, but we want to invest outside the United States. It's always funny when Trump is like quoting other people talking, because it generally, 100% for a fact, the conversation did not go that way. Trump was trying to raw dog them in a deal, and there were like very sophisticated investors, real serious business people on the other end of the table, and Trump was, uh, being bombastic and overly just over the top with it, extra with it, on trying to sell them on something. And I'm pretty sure they just walked away like, oh, what were we thinking trying to do business with him? So we had just handed them back their country. They were watching TV in the best hotel rooms in Paris while our kids were fighting for them, and they didn't want to invest in this country. How stupid are we? We Why didn't the United States make a deal with them that outlined how they would pay for us to get their money, their country back for them? They would have paid anything if they just asked. If just asked. Okay, I guess that makes sense grammatically. Anyway, the point is, we're spending trillions of dollars to safeguard other countries. We're paying for the privilege of fighting their battles. It makes no sense to me. It really is time the rest of the world paid their fair share. And if I have anything to say about it, they will. The biggest question people ask about foreign policy is, at what point do we put boots on the ground? We can't be afraid to use our military, but sending our sons and daughters should be the very last resort. I've seen what wars do to our kids. I've seen their broken bodies, know all about the horrors that live in their heads and the enormous effects of trauma. We cannot commit American troops to battle without a real and tangible objective. Did you see it when you went to Vietnam, Trump? Oh, wait, no, you were a draft dodger. Okay. I thought you were flat footed. How could you see the horrors of war? Anyway, my rules of engagement have always been pretty simple. If we are going to intervene in a conflict, there had better be a direct threat to our national interests. The threat should be so obvious that most Americans will know where the hotspot is on the globe and will quickly understand why we are getting involved. Also, we'd better have an airtight plan to win and get out. In other words, my strategy would be the exact opposite of our strategy in going to war with Iraq. Iraq was no threat to us. The American people had no idea why the Bush administration decided to attack. Our brilliant strategists had to twist our intelligence reports and drum up reasons for an invasion. We targeted Saddam Hussein's alleged weapons of mass destruction as a justification. There was no plan, or a very flawed one, to win and leave. Before the war started, I came out very strongly against it. It made no sense to me. I said then that it would be a disaster and would destabilize the Middle East. I said that without Iraq to hold them back, Iran would attempt to take over the Middle East. Don't hold me on this, but I've heard that Trump has been saying he was against the Iraq War. He always thought it was crazy or a disaster. He wasn't involved in politics in 2003, 2004 when we did go to Iraq, but he was a very public figure and he occasionally commented on politics. And I believe, and y'all can do more research on this, Trump was sort of like ambivalent about it. Like he wasn't saying, like he wasn't outside like with a picket sign saying, we need to not invade Iraq. He wasn't protesting or anything like that, and he wasn't vociferous in his criticism of the war. But he was like saying, like, well, if we're gonna do it, let's do it this way and that way and stuff like that. That's my understanding of his stance on the Iraq War back when the debate was raging in Congress about whether to invade or not. Right. I think he lent tacit support to the idea of invading Iraq. It wasn't like he was adamantly against it. This is a lie that he loves to spread, right? Anyway, continuing here. And that's exactly what has happened. There are some places in the world where massive force is necessary. The threat from ISIS is real. It is a new kind of enemy and it has to be stopped. The longer we wait before doing that, the more dangerous it will become. We don't need another 9/11 to understand that people want to kill us, and we're not doing enough to prevent them from spreading their vicious brand of terrorism. The headline and videos tell us what we're dealing with: rapes, kidnapping, and lining up of civilians in order to cut their heads off. There is also strong evidence that ISIS is resorting to chemical warfare. It's time to get serious about our response. Either we're fighting to win or we're going to continue to be big losers. Unfortunately, it may require boots on the ground to fight the Islamic State. I don't think it's necessary to broadcast our strategy. In fact, one of the most ridiculous policy blunders President Obama has committed was to announce our timetable for withdrawal from Iraq and Afghanistan. If military advisors recommend it, we should commit a limited but sufficient number of troops to fight on the ground. We could also easily expand air operations to make it impossible for ISIS to ever find safe haven anywhere in the region. Our policy of trying to be advisors in the field has certainly been a failure. However, I have a unique perspective on what action we should take. While ISIS is our most violent enemy, they ended up with oil in Iraq and Syria that we should have taken. This is just plain illegal. It's illegal to take another country's resources. Like he was talking about doing crimes in his own book. Anyway, That oil, along with ransom and extortion, is funding their enemy. I've advocated bombing the hell out of those oil fields to cut off this source of their money. This would barely affect the world oil supply, but it would dramatically reduce their ability to fund terrorism. We have to take that oil because it is the source of their wealth. We would hit them so hard and so fast in so many different ways they wouldn't know what happened. And then we'd hit them again and again until ISIS ceased to exist as a threat to anybody. It's just straight out imperialism. Like, yeah, we're going to go to this country that has, issues with domestic terrorists in their land and take their natural resources as a reward for us killing their terrorists there. It's literally insane. It's imperialism. It's the same sort of justification the British used when they went to different lands. They said, "Oh, we're fighting the rebels. We're fighting the other people that are destroying your kingdom, right? And in return, we will take all of your country. You are now under the protection of the British Empire, right?" Continuing here. We don't have a choice. These people are medieval barbarians. They cut off heads, they drown people, they torture people, and we can't allow them to ever gain a safe foothold anywhere. We do the same thing, maybe not decapitation, but we read the book Hood by Allison Kinney in our last book react series, and all of those things here, we torture people, we drown people, we waterboard people. Yeah, we did all of that in Guantanamo and Abu Ghraib. Continuing here, the number of ISIS troops is relatively small. Our intelligence community has estimated that there are no more than 30,000 to 50,000 ISIS fighters. People are usually surprised by that number. ISIS has done such a good job promoting fear that people assume it to be a much larger force. It isn't. The entire ISIS force probably wouldn't even fill Yankee Stadium. So defeating them requires a real commitment to go after them relentlessly wherever they are without stopping until every one of them is dead, and always bringing in other countries to help out. Iran is a much more complex problem. I am not afraid to criticize Obama when he gets it wrong. When he was running for president in 2008, he correctly said Iran is a grave threat. It has an illicit nuclear program. It supports terrorism across the region and militias in Iraq. It threatens Israel's existence and it denies the Holocaust. So why, when Iran was struggling financially, would he agree to a nuclear deal that releases billions of dollars worth of assets, which will further subsidize their terrorism business? It makes no sense. Iran was a powerful nation until the religious fanatics took over. As long as those people remain in power, Iran will be our enemy and a threat to Israel's existence. Their supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, has promised that Israel won't exist in 25 years. We have to take that threat seriously and act accordingly. It's also amazing how the conservatives are so beholden to Israel, right? If you want peace in the Middle East, you have to not continue to support the genocidal Zionists there who are destabilizing the region, taking people's land, torturing the Palestinian people. I've always loved and admired the Jewish people and supported the special relationship we have with Israel. The next president has to restore our traditionally strong partnership. We have been there for Israel and will continue to be there for Israel because it is the only stable democracy in that region. It has become a fair trading partner and a fellow pioneer on the frontiers of medicine, communications, technology, and energy development, which will benefit both of our nations well into the future. The miles that separate us right now from Iran are only a temporary barrier for them. If or when they develop missiles that can reach this country, they will become a much greater threat. Meanwhile, they are financially supporting terrorist groups all over the world, and those groups are a real threat to our country and to our military serving overseas. Our enemies no longer need huge armies or billion-dollar missile systems to attack this country. Technology has made it possible for one or two terrorists to inflict terrible damage on us. We've got to stop Iran from sponsoring these murderers, but instead we continue losing. The deal President Obama negotiated with Iran was the worst I have ever seen. We couldn't have done worse. Iran was boxed in and the sanctions were hurting them. President Obama put his legacy on the line, and before we walked into negotiations, the mullahs knew he had to have a deal or end up looking even more incompetent. So they fleeced him. Disgraceful. We did everything wrong in those negotiations. Instead of removing the sanctions that forced the Iranians to negotiate, we should have doubled up or tripled the sanctions. It makes no sense. It makes no sense because right now there are sanctions on Iran, and some say they are continuing to enrich plutonium and try to gain nuclear power and that sort of stuff, which they would have every right to do. to protect their national sovereignty, just like the U.S. does. When they're threatened so much by the U.S. and other powers over there, they have the right to protect their nation. Of course, we should all denuclearize, but if we're gonna say like, okay, we're the only ones allowed to have the nukes, meanwhile we can continue to bully people all across the world, it doesn't make sense, right? It doesn't make sense to me. Uh, Remember the principal strategy of negotiation: the side that needs the deal the most is the one that should walk away with the least. I would have increased the sanction until the conditions there were so terrible that the Iranian leaders were begging for a deal. Sanctions only hurt the normal people, like the regular people in the street. The Iranian elite, the political class, the business people, the merchants, the people who send their kids to study in France and Germany and stuff like that, they're doing just fine. It's just hurting the normal people. I would have laid down certain conditions that had to be agreed to, starting with the release of our four prisoners. I wouldn't have settled for less than a complete dismantling of all their nuclear facilities, destruction of their centrifuges, and on site inspections anytime, anywhere. We didn't get any of that, none of it. And then we released billions of dollars that had been frozen. We literally paid them to force us to accept a terrible deal. That would be like me beginning negotiations to build another magnificent skyscraper along the Hudson with 50-mile views in all directions and walking out with approval to put up a small three-story building facing a wall. Iran got what it wanted: the release of their seized assets, and in return gave up what might have seemed like huge concessions, only to find out that there were so many loopholes that it will be nearly impossible to enforce anything meaningful. The possibility of Iran defying the world and developing a nuclear weapon is still very real. If the Iranians decide to prevent us or the International Atomic Energy Agency from inspecting their facilities, there isn't too much that we can do about it other than take military action. The coalition of countries that enforce those sanctions is finished. Those countries, and several of them couldn't care less about Israel, had people in Tehran talking business before the ink had dried on the side agreements. And then President Obama wouldn't let Congress look at the deal. Once the new Iranian partners start making money, there is no way the sanctions can ever be put back into place. Unfortunately, the deal is done. Once the sanctions are removed, there is no going back, no snapback. Putting sanctions back in place unilaterally won't do any good. I am especially good at reading a contract. There is always a loophole. We need to find it, and if necessary, they will pay big league dollars. Whatever it takes, whatever we do, Iran cannot be allowed to build a nuclear weapon. They are there are many different ways to make sure that Iran is never armed with nuclear weapons. I'd be happy to sit down with the Iranian leaders when they understand that the best course for them, if they want to be a major player in the civilized world, is to close down their entire nuclear program. And Iran with a nuclear weapon would start a nuclear arms race in the Middle East with potentially devastating consequences. The situation would rapidly escalate to being the most dangerous threat Israel has ever faced. And if it would force us to use extreme measures in defense of Israel and other allies in the region. Wow, that's not going to happen, whatever Iran might think right now. It's so crazy, right? We want peace in the world. We don't want to be involved in military conflicts. But yeah, let's continue to antagonize Iran. Let's continue to sanction their people. Let's continue to try to cripple their economy while Israel can have nuclear weapons, continue to destabilize the region, continue to torture the Palestinian people, and continue to have their weapons pointed at Iran, continue to assassinate leaders on Iranian soil, right? It makes no sense. Of course, he's saying like, I don't want to fight, but let's make every situation possible to instigate war, to instigate conflict here. All right. Today, the world has to deal with two sets of China. The good China is the one that has built great cities and provided housing and education for millions of people. The good China allows its citizens to travel around the world and get an education and has helped create a growing middle class. The bad China is the one that's mostly hidden to outsiders. It's the government that controls internet access for its citizens, cracks down on political dissent, closes newspapers, jails dissidents, restricts individual freedoms, launches cyber attacks, and uses its clout around the world to manipulate economies. And all the while, it is building up its military strength. There is no question that dealing with China, along with Russia, is going to continue to our biggest challenge long term. Our competition with China right now is economic, and we've been losing that battle for a long time. China has become our third largest trading partner behind only our neighbors, Canada and Mexico. Yet China holds more of our American debt, more than $1.5 trillion dollars than any other country, although Japan is close. As we saw in the summer of 2015 when the Chinese stock market collapsed, our economies are tied together in a very negative way. Many years ago, there was an adage that when General Motors sneezes, the stock market catches a flu. In those days, GM was such a big player in the economy that if it stumbled, our economy suffered too. The recent precipitous decline of the Chinese stock market caused our own Dow Jones average to plummet 1,000 points in a couple of days as investors ran for cover. Likewise, our trade deficit has been a dangerous drag on our economy. When China devalues its currency, this upsets the already tenuous balance of trade. We know that we have become dependent on the emerging Chinese markets, but they have become dependent on us too. In 2014, we imported 17% more Chinese goods than any other country in the world. Hong Kong, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of China, was second and Japan a distant third. The health of the Chinese economy depends on us. They need our trade more than we need them. Foolishly, we don't use that to our advantage. For the last few decades, China's economy has been growing at a phenomenal 9 to 10% each year, although more recently, there are signs of a cooling off. Despite these recent upheavals, economists have made predictions that within the next decade, China will replace the United States as the world's largest economy. What have we done to make sure we will be able to compete with them? What have we done to beat them? I'll tell you what we've done. We've rolled over. There are people who wish I wouldn't refer to China as our enemy, but that's exactly what they are. They have destroyed entire industries by utilizing low wage workers, cost us tens of thousands of jobs, spied on our businesses, stolen our technology, and have manipulated and devalued their currency, which makes importing our goods more expensive and sometimes impossible. I know from my own experience that this is a difficult problem. The Chinese are very savvy business people, and they have great advantages over our manufacturers. I've had several Trump brand products made there. Like, okay, uh, mm, that's a good example of the difference between a politician and a businessman. To say in, to stay in business, I have to be smarter than my competition. I could make a very important point if I refuse to have my goods manufactured there. As long as we're playing under these conditions, American companies don't have a choice. Third world countries have substantially lower production costs. They have lower overhead and pay their workers a lot less. As a businessman, I have an obligation to all of my employees and to consumers and stockholders to produce the best product at the lowest possible price. However, as a matter of American global policy, we want to take away China's advantages. Last year, President Obama went to China and they held a beautiful banquet for him. Before Chinese President Xi Jinping made a reciprocal visit here, the White House announced plans for a lavish dinner. I made the point that hosting a state dinner for his honor was about the last thing I would do. Instead, I tell him it was time we got about the last sorry. Instead, I tell him it was time we got down to business and we would go to work. For starters, the Chinese regime must stop devaluing their currency because doing so makes it even harder for the rest of the world to compete. The reality is that China needs a strong American economy as much as we need their business. In May 2015, for example, Americans bought $1 out of every $5 worth of products China exported that month. We buy almost 20% of all their exports, considerably more than the EU does, which is the second biggest consumer of Chinese goods. And that American percentage is increasing every year, making China more and more dependent on the American consumer for its own prosperity. As Steve Forbes wrote in his magazine, China's holdings in U.S. Treasuries, which reached record levels in 2013, are setting off alarm bells that they shouldn't. They underscore that Beijing is becoming more dependent on the U.S. and the rest of the world for its strength and prosperity. Remember, the Chinese need us as much as we need them, maybe even more. So, what should we do about it? We are going to use the leverage we have to change the situation so that it favors America and our people. We have to start by getting tough with the Chinese. I've negotiated with Chinese companies. I know how they do business. I'm actually landlord to China's largest bank, which has its offices in Trump Tower. We've successfully negotiated several leases. It hasn't always been easy. These are skilled people, but I never back down. Believe me, I know the best negotiators in this country, and a lot of them would be ready to go to work creating a fair balance of trade. If people like Carl Icahn were representing America, we would see a big difference in our trading policy. We actually hold a very strong hand. Unfortunately, our politicians are either too stupid or too foolish to understand this. Maybe they are both. We have several very good options, but it is always important to be flexible and never reveal our cards. Our politicians talk too much. President Obama makes strong statements and promises us vigorous actions, then nothing happens. So, what happens when he makes those promises and never follows through? He loses all credibility. I wonder what our great generals, men like MacArthur and Patton, would say if they heard a president revealing our plans for the Middle East or daring our enemies to cross the line. A very good story recently quoted a businessman describing me as unpredictable, noting it was one of my better qualities and helped me make a lot of money. Now that I am running for president, which so many experts predicted I would not do, the same trait has made it really hard for all my critics to figure out how to compete with my message. They're all busy playing nicely, following all the establishment rules, taking every predictable step, trying to fit inside the conventional wisdom, and when I don't play the game, they don't know how to respond. Tipping your hand is one of the dumbest mistakes you can make in a military confrontation. I've read a lot of history, and I don't recall reading that General George Washington made hotel reservations in Valley Forge, or that he sent ahead his best wishes to the Hessians in Trenton. The element of I know for a fact Trump did not write that sentence. I know for a fact I know for a fact he did not write that. That's all like, man, I forgot the name of the guy who ghost wrote this book, but that's that guy. There's no way Trump knows about the Hessians in Valley Forge. Oh man, continuing here. Uh, the element of surprise wins battles. So I don't tell the other side what I'm doing. I don't warn them, and I don't let them fit me comfortably into a predictable pattern. I don't want people to know exactly what I'm doing or thinking. I like being unpredictable. It keeps them off balance. As a leader, I also know there are times when you should keep your cards close to the vest. When I was assembling property to build a skyscraper, for example, I had to buy many small lots so I could combine them into one very large and valuable building location. And total secrecy was an absolute necessity. If the owners of those properties had found out what I was doing, they would have been able to squeeze considerably more money out of me for their properties. My point is that right now we're doing too much talking. When dealing with China, we need to stand up to them and remind them that it's bad business to take advantage of your best customer. And then we should sit down and figure out how to make this a more equitable relationship. There is no one size fits all foreign policy. We need to make our beliefs very clear and let them form the framework of our policy. Everything begins with a strong military. Everything. We will have the strongest military in our history, and our people will be equipped with the best weaponry and protection available. Period. That means the best missile systems, the best cyber warfare training and equipment, and the best trained soldiers. And when they come home after a war battered and bruised, our troops won't have to wait months for treatment. We owe those who serve us the best and the fastest care. It's ridiculous how long our vets have to wait to get the help they deserve. They are our heroes, and the present administration has forgotten them. So how do we turn the tide and start winning again? As I've said, it starts with the most advanced and muscular. Yo, Trump is always saying like some gay stuff. The most advanced and muscular military. I'm sorry, that's kind of well, a big, strong, muscular, oiled up soldiers. As I've said, it starts with the most advanced and muscular military in the world, and the most mobile one as well. We need to put some of the bill for this transformation on the Saudi Arabians, the South Koreans, the Germans, the Japanese, and the British. We're protecting them after all, and they should share in the cost. Next, we need to operate from a position of economic strength. We have the most powerful consumer engine in the world. We just need to start using it to our full advantage. Nobody likes to do business more than I do, but every deal I make will have one adjective: America wins. We need to use the economic strength of American markets and the American consumer to assist our friends and remind our enemies about the benefits of cooperation. We need to use those strengths to form stronger alliances with our natural allies, but we need to expect them to be there when they are needed. I still don't understand why Germany and other countries watched impassively as Putin marched into Ukraine. You can be sure Israel can be counted on to stand tall with us in the Middle East. And finally, we need to pay special attention to the Chinese. Their days of undercutting us with protectionist policies and cyber theft are over. The new dawn of America has just begun. I got to say this about China. My opinion is that, if Americans don't like China, if they don't like, the trade deficit, then Americans have to stop liking cheap products. We got to stop shopping at Walmart and at Target. If you're going to say, capitalism is the best system, it's the greatest way to create the most economic prosperity, you can't at the same time criticize capitalist countries trying to feed the demand of consumers who want cheaper and cheaper goods, especially when Americans are getting paid less and less or wages are not keeping up with inflation. So it doesn't make sense on one hand to say, we want to punish China because they're sending us cheap shit that we really, really like. We like $1,000 iPhones. We like $40 sneakers. We like, $100 Jordans, right? Like, there's no way that you can produce the amounts of goods that Americans want to consume in America and not have the prices be out of control. So either you reform capitalism or you just deal with the consequences of having to see things continue to be outsourced by global corporations who want to continue to earn profits, please their shareholders, and please the consumers who want cheaper and cheaper stuff. You get what I'm saying? I'm not an economist in that way, but Um, I do remember that economists said, putting up tariffs more expensive. And what did the government end up doing? Just giving more and more money away to American farmers who were not doing anything with it, planting and growing, harvesting all these soybeans that just sat in silos until they rotted, stuff like that. Anyway, continuing here, let's go to chapter 5, education, a failing grade. My father did not graduate from college. He was too busy working and building his business, but he understood and appreciated the value of an education. He had great respect for people with college degrees, even though he had built a large real estate business and earned many times more than most of them. With my father's financial assistance, his younger brother, John, earned his master's degree in physics from Columbia and his PhD from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, one of the most prestigious universities in America. John became a noted professor at MIT and invented one of the first million-volt X-ray generators that was used to save the lives of cancer patients. During World War II, he played an important role in the development of radar. President Truman awarded him the President's Certificate of Merit, and he was a recipient of the National Medal of Science. Now, that guy could actually be president. That's a guy I would actually vote for to be president. From my father and my uncle, I learned the value of work and the value of a good education. From my own experience, I learned what happens when you put them together. I went to the Wharton School of Finance at the University of Pennsylvania, which is, in my opinion, the best business school in America, and arguably the hardest there is to get into. There is one thing I know that even the professional politicians will support: education is good. It's the easiest statement for a politician to support. But the question is, how do we make sure the best education possible is available for the most American kids? Because right now, that is not the situation. Like so many other areas that our so called leaders have wreaked their havoc upon, the American educational system is failing. We're 26th in the world. 26th, that's an embarrassment. We spend more money on education per capita than any other nation. But 25 countries in the developed world provide a better education for their kids than we do for ours. This is simply unacceptable. Part of the problem is the politicians. They are unable to run a national education system with a top down, one size fits all approach. Our states and local districts are doing just fine making their own decisions on how best to educate our children. Now, the federal Department of Education has been dictating educational policy for too long, and that needs to stop. Common Core doesn't work. Okay, if we have a failing education system and currently all the states are sort of like running their own education systems, isn't the problem instead the states and not actually the federal government? This doesn't make sense. Once again, everything he says is paradoxical. We want a strong military, but let's continue to harass and bully the countries in the Middle East. We want to reform education, but let's keep it to the states when the states are not educating our kids poorly. All right. Rodman said, "Who wrote this book? Trump is not this thoughtful." I forgot the name of the ghostwriter. I talked about the ghostwriter of this book in the first part of this series, Rodman. I showed you where you can find the true writer of this book. But yeah, there are a few sentences here that are absolutely not from him. And it's obviously coming from his advisors and the major backers who want him to put their policies in his book. So yeah, it's not coming from Trump exactly, but some of the sentences definitely are. When he says, nobody likes to do business more than me. Like that's definitely him. But once again, guys, you can find this book on Amazon. It's a real book. It's from 2015. We're gonna try to read Trump's new book that drops in September in a few weeks. But also at the same time, we're gonna be reading Kamala Harris's book after this because we're fair and balanced on this channel. Then after that, we're gonna read J.D. Vance's book on this. On We're going to read Hillbilly Elegy by J.D. Vance, Trump's running mate, if he still is his running mate. I've been hearing rumors that J.D. Vance might get kicked out. Then also after that, we're going to read Tim Walz's book, if he has one, and break down all of the people that are involved in one of the most important elections in American history. All right. All right. Commando 21 says, Simon, you need MAGA? Yeah, I need MAGA to make fun of. I need MAGA to roast. All right. 4.7 stars. Yeah, it's a great book for people who have never read a book, people who just buy it and just use it to jerk off to Trump on the picture, right? Because MAGA is really dumb. MAGA is really, really dumb. Continuing here. So, part of the problem is the politicians. They are unable to run a national education system with the top down, one size fits all approach. Our states and local districts are doing just fine making their own decisions on how best to educate our children. Now, the Federal Department of Education has been dictating educational policy for too long, and that needs to stop. Common Core doesn't work. A lot of people believe the Department of Education should just be eliminated. Get rid of it. If we don't eliminate it completely, we certainly need to cut its power and reach. Education has to be run locally. Common Core, No Child Left Behind, and Race to the Top are all programs that take decisions away from parents and local school boards. These programs allow the progressives in the Department of Education to indoctrinate, not educate our kids. What they are doing now does not fit the American model of governance. I am totally against these programs and the Department of Education. It's a disaster. We cannot continue to fail our children, the very future of this nation. I went to a military school, New York Military Academy. It was a tough, tough place. There were ex drill sergeants all over the place, and these people like to scream, and above all, they like to fight. Our instructors were demanding about everything from academics to personal hygiene. I learned American history and I learned how to neatly fold my clothing so it could be stacked. That might not be a skill that has had much application in my life, but it was part of teaching my fellow cadets and me discipline, focus, and self reliance. The main rule was pretty simple: do it right or do it again. One of my roommates from school told a reporter recently, the school taught you how to be a leader. It taught you, show me a sore loser and I'll show you a loser. Honesty and straightforwardness were the rule of law. It got ingrained in us that you don't lie, cheat, or steal and tolerate those who do. But Trump has lied, cheated, and stolen his entire career. Anyway, this may be why I never became a politician until now. All right. Our national education system was never intended to be limited to the three R's: history and science. It was designed to produce well rounded young people capable of prospering in the world. In addition to an education, kids were supposed to graduate with some basic values, self discipline, and life skills. A little common sense wouldn't hurt either. Our schools don't teach that anymore. Instead, we're more concerned about kids having self esteem and feeling good about themselves than we are about preparing them for a real life. The politically correct crowd has taken over our schools, and as a result, we are failing our children. And our children will fail America if we don't do something about it. Educators are worried that kids will feel bad if they flunk a test. You know what makes a kid feel good? Winning, succeeding. We've dumbed down the curriculum to the lowest common denominator. In many schools, we've eliminated grading entirely, and diplomas have been practically devalued into certificates of attendance. Our schools, our teachers, and our kids are capable of more, a lot more. The problem is we're taking the easy way out. Instead of creating high standards and demanding more, we're expecting less. We have to get tougher. Forget that self-esteem stuff. We need to start challenging kids. We need to allow them to fail when they don't work hard. Anyone who has succeeded in business has survived a lot of failure, but they were tough enough to get back up and try again. Kids need to learn that success requires persistence. Self esteem should come from overcoming challenges and surviving the hard knocks of trying to be better. Yet today, some teachers and school administrators are more concerned about hurting their students' feelings or about hearing complaints from parents than they're being too tough. Instead of becoming more competitive, we're actually eliminating competition. That's incredible and wrong. Rodman says, we as a people advocate for politicians who do nothing for us, no matter political affiliation. Um, I believe that's true. As a communist, yes. As a communist, Rodman, I agree with you. All of the politicians, Republicans and Democrats, are beholden by the capitalist class. That's why we need to overthrow capitalism. That's why workers need to get organized. That's why we need to raise class consciousness. So, yes, Rodman, I agree. And that's why I endorse the CPUSA. I endorse the Green Party. I endorse the Democratic Socialists of America for a reformation and a revolution in how politics is done in America. So, yeah, Rodman, I agree with you. Continuing here, competition makes you stronger. It forces you to work harder, to do more. Corporations that can't compete with our companies go out of business, no matter how nice they are or how good they feel about themselves. Small businesses have the same challenge. The owners have to work hard and compete for their survival, or they won't make it. Competition is why I'm very much in favor of school choice. Let schools compete for kids. I guarantee that if you force schools to get better or close because parents didn't want to enroll their kids there, they would get better. Those schools that weren't good enough to attract students would close, and that's a good thing. For 2 decades, I've been urging politicians to open the schoolhouse doors and let parents decide which schools are best for their children. Professional educators look to options such as school choice, charter schools, voucher programs, magnet schools, and opportunity scholarships. Call them what you want, they all come down to the same thing: fostering competition. Those people who are against offering parents choice claim that doing so would be the end of good public schools. Better charter or magnet schools would drain the top kids out of that system or hurt the morale of those left behind. Suddenly, the excellence that comes from competition is being criticized. Let's look at the facts. While the number of charter schools has grown substantially, there are still a small percentage of our public schools. They are still a small percentage of our public schools, but it looks like they are making a difference, especially in urban areas. Stanford University Center for Research on Education Outcomes looked at the impact charter schools have made in 41 urban areas. They report that charter school students, compared to students in public schools, learn 40 days more advanced in math and 28 more days in reading. That is significant, no matter how you look at it. Look, I know that people both for and against school choice can roll out endless arguments and statistics showing charter schools are either very successful or make no difference at all. This is a legitimate debate, but anyone except a politician running for office and looking for support from the teachers union has to realize that smaller class sizes, more individualized instruction, and stricter discipline all make a huge positive difference. Making teachers accountable is important, but we should stop measuring their performance with mindless standardized tests. We should be embracing the success stories and using them as a model for improving the others. I just got to say this: I don't know exactly everything about charter schools, school choice, voucher programs, and everything like that. But the number one thing that we're hearing from teachers all across America is that there is a lack of pay. And I don't know if Trump is going to say this, but I'm pretty sure he's not in this book. But if you're not talking about raising teachers' salaries across the board in America, then it's a non-starter. It's a non-starter. That's one of the biggest issues. You have teachers quitting. You have teachers doing OnlyFans. You have teachers selling their blood, their plasma during the summer, just trying to make ends meet in America. We treat teachers worse than janitors in America. That's me being hyperbolic like Trump, but it's still pretty bad to be a teacher in America. Continuing here. The defense budget should be slashed in favor of education. I can agree with that, Rodman. We need to defund the military. I completely agree with that. Because when we continue to fund this military, we will continue to antagonize the rest of the countries around the world. The ones that we say we don't want to police, the ones we say we don't want to invade. Yeah, it's going to continue to be this sort of rabbit hole. I agree with you, Rodman. Continuing here. So, I'm not as concerned about the kids growing up in wealthy communities where high property taxes have allowed them to build great schools, hire the best teachers, and provide all the supplies they need. Those schools are doing fine. In many urban areas, however, schools must fight for every tax dollar and are forced to have teachers and students bring in their own basic supplies such as pencils and paper. That's a national tragedy. The problem with public schools is that in many places, there is no way to take an honest measurement of how they're doing. If a charter school isn't doing the job, it closes. That's the type of accountability we need throughout our educational system. One huge obstacle is the strength of the teachers union. Teachers unions don't want school choice because it means a potential reduction in union protected jobs. In New York, for example, the unions have been so powerful for so long. that more than 4 decades ago, Woody Allen had a scene in his movie Sleeper in which a man wakes up in the future and is told that the world he'd known had been destroyed when the president of the powerful teachers union got hold of a nuclear warhead. Thanks to strong contracts negotiated by the New York City Teacher Union, it's become more impossible to discipline a teacher, much less actually fire one. It's so crazy. It's so crazy that Trump, his argument for how powerful the teachers union is a Woody Allen movie. Like, what type of person do you have to be to take a fictional story and use that to amplify your point? Of course, you can use that for different things, right? Like, you can, say that people were writing books about how terrible this thing was, and they used fiction to express their grievances and stuff like that. But come on, you could have made a better argument than this. Like in your book, Trump. For the literate people of America who are actually going to try to read your words and find out your arguments and understand your point of view, this was your chance to have really good arguments in this book. But he misses the mark in this by not citing any sources, just using hyperbolic language, using conjecture, ad hoc points of view, ad hoc comments. It's just a shame. Anyway, Commando 21 says absolutely not. I believe he says absolutely not. Teachers don't need higher pay. So that's a shame, because there are so many teachers living below the poverty line in America, right? Barely being able to put food on their own tables, having to buy their own supplies for school. If you disagree with teachers having more pay, that's absolutely a shame, right? Anyway, continuing here. When there is a legitimate complaint against a teacher in the New York system, rather than having a quick hearing to determine the validity of the complaint, teachers are assigned to an area known as the rubber room, where they wait for their hearing. And they wait. They sit in empty classrooms or converted closets and do nothing, but they will still get paid their whole salary. Some teachers spend several years waiting. No wonder they call it the rubber room. The whole concept is insane, but it's the result of the contracts that strong unions have forced on New York and other cities. When teacher unions fight against school choice, the unions are saying that their product isn't good enough to compete in a free marketplace. Maybe they are right. And what about the good teachers? They can get stuck too and are at the mercy of the union. These unions have a nice monopoly going, so why wouldn't they want to protect their turf? By the way, the teachers are not the only ones with troublesome unions. In New York City, the janitors don't arrive in the morning until exactly the same time as the students. That means the boiler might not be fired up yet, or doors might not be unlocked, so students have to wait outside. To be upfront, I'm not a fan of the teachers union, but I have great admiration and respect for teachers. Most of us can name a teacher or two who had a profound influence on our lives, but we've made teaching a tough profession. Good teachers love to teach. They respect and honor their profession. In too many classrooms, though, we've taken away their right to discipline disruptive kids, turning the teachers into babysitters as much as educators. And a lot of good teachers aren't paid enough. Okay, so he's actually going to talk about raising teacher pay. All right. It's an interesting choice we've made as a society. We entrust our kids to teachers for most of the daytime when they'll have a really big impact on how their students will grow up. But we don't pay enough to attract the best people to the profession. Unfortunately, teachers are not paid on merit. The standard for advancement is mostly the number of years of service, seniority. The really good and inspirational teachers burn out under the painful conditions found in too many schools. The bad teachers tend to hang around since they have nowhere else to go. Thus, the paychecks tend to be bigger for the less capable. That's exactly the opposite of what we should be doing. One way of making the profession more attractive is to put some discipline back in the school. A lot of our schools aren't safe. Putting metal detectors at the door may prevent kids from bringing in weapons, but it still doesn't prevent them from causing problems. We need to get a lot tougher on troublemakers. We need to stop feeling sorry for them. They are robbing other kids of time to learn. I'm not saying we should go back to the days when teachers would get physical with students, but we need to restore rules about behavior in the classroom and hire trained security guards who can help enforce those rules. The parents or guardians must be brought into the process as well. It's so crazy that Americans have to think about their kids bringing guns to school. It's also a crazy idea to think just raising teachers' pay based on merit is the best way to actually do it. Of course, if you're a great teacher, you should be paid more. So I agree with that in principle. But just as a base level, at a base level, students need to get paid more. All right. Uh, okay. Commando 21 says cut the EPA. This is a person who doesn't read. Commando 21 is not even paying attention. Um, the EPA has been brought up in this book yet. Um, so Commando 21 says, Simon, you need a better webcam and mic. Well, if you want me to get one, why don't you donate to this channel? All donations to this channel will be reinvested and also go towards my tuition to study sociology while living out here in Budapest. So if you want to help this young black man continue learning, growing, developing, and providing educational resources for the people, drop a super chat. Drop a super chat for this channel. And once again, guys, if anybody has any books that you want me to read, put them in the comments section and we will try to read them. We will try to cover all those books. But the important thing is that you can hear me. I know I'm a handsome, sexy, chocolate, melanated man, but you do not need to see me actually to get the information that we're getting here. But you can see my face clearly. I'm looking at my face right now on the screen, and I look pretty handsome. I sound okay. So my mic is good, my camera is good. It's about the information. You get me? Continuing here. Most disciplinary problems among students begin in the home. All parents should ask themselves, what kind of example am I setting? At the same time, there is nothing more important to the future of this country than our colleges and universities. We have the best higher education system in the world. There is a reason that young people from all over the world come here to study at our schools. The problem is that the cost of higher education is skyrocketing, making it so far out of reach that many potential students either can't afford it or have to take out huge loans to pay the tuition. Instead of making it easier for more of our young people to get the education they need, we're making it harder to access and thus available to only the wealthier families. My father succeeded without a college degree, but that would be much harder to do today. According to the Census Bureau, people with a bachelor's degree earn an average of $51,000 a year. That's $23,000 more a year than people with just a high school diploma and almost three times as much as high school dropouts. When I speak at a college, the students surround me and ask me two questions. First, can I give or get them a job? And second, what can we do about their loans? They haven't even graduated from school. They haven't yet started working, and already they've mortgaged their future. A 4-year degree today can be expensive enough to create six-figure debt. Getting an advanced degree or a medical education can put a young professional well over $100,000 to $200,000 in debt. If the students can't get enough scholarships or loan support, the parents have to step in, despite the risks to their own retirement funds. They may have to borrow the money, often by taking out a second mortgage if they have sufficient value in their home. We can't forgive these loans, but we should take steps to help them. The big problem is the federal government. There is no reason the federal government should profit from student loans. This only makes an already difficult problem worse. The federal student loan program turned $41.3 billion in profit in 2013. These student loans are probably one of the only things that the government shouldn't make money from, and yet it does. And do you think this has anything to do with why schools continue to raise their tuition every year? These loans should be viewed as an investment in America's future. In the end, we have no choice. We have to change the way we educate our children. We should return the basic control and responsibility for our schools to the states and local communities. They need to set standards for their teachers and students that reward competitive quality and excellence. Our communities have to make education a priority with flexibility in the property taxes and other funding involved. And most important, the parents have to instill a spirit of discipline, focus, and passion for learning in their children because the schools can't do it alone. We are living in a very competitive world. If we study how the Asian countries have taken over in so many of the technology based industries, the handwriting is on the wall. The future of our country is studying in our classrooms right now. Making our education system work is an important step toward making America great again. Okay, so one thing that I'm actually surprised here is that Trump is saying that the federal government, if they give out loans, they shouldn't charge for them. If I'm understanding that right, which is actually something that I can agree with. But I disagree with him here that the U.S. government could not forgive these loans. The $41.3 billion or whatever trillions of dollars, I'm pretty sure the student loan debt in America is in the trillions, could be completely forgiven. If I believe also he's implying here that the federal government shouldn't be giving out loans, and maybe also he is trying to say that the private sector should be the ones that are only doing student loans. I believe that's highly dangerous as well. People should be able to file for bankruptcy from their student loans. Student loans should automatically be forgiven, but there's no reason at all, period. The richest, most powerful nation in the world with an endless supply of money to fund the Pentagon's black budget can't guarantee universal higher education for everybody free of charge. I'm in Hungary right now. I'm in, and here it's basically pretty much free. Basically is pretty much free. Now, if Hungary can do it, if Poland can do it, if Germany can do it, if France can do it, if many other European nations can do it, why can't the US do it? It's because we are obsessed with the gun in more ways than one, right? So anyway, yeah. Commando 21 says Simon is donate. Oh, okay. So Commando 21 is really stupid once again. He can't even spell. Can't even spell. Doesn't read. Doesn't pay attention. He's the worst student in my class. Literally the worst student in my class. Simon is donate, but I'm a poor white man who's oppressed by the system. I'd a poor white man. That wouldn't even make sense. Okay, it comes out of the taxpayer's pocket. Okay, no, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't come out of the taxpayers' pockets because number one, most of the federal government is funded by the treasury bonds that we sell to most other nations and rich investors. The U.S. government is funded mostly by selling bonds. No, it is not coming out of the taxpayer's pocket. If anything, it's coming out of China's pocket. China can finance every U.S. student going to college for free because China buys so much U.S. Treasury bonds. I know this is hard for you to understand, Commando 2021, because you're missing a few chromosomes, a few brain cells, and as you admitted, you're a poor, stupid white man in America. But yes, the US government has enough money to do these amazing things that other poorer European nations can do. I know that's hard to comprehend, but it's possible. Anyway, continuing here, chapter 6, the energy debate, a lot of hot air. As often attributed to Mark Twain, everybody talks about the weather, but nobody does anything about it. Apparently, we're trying to prove him wrong. We are actually blaming weather patterns on man made causes. First, the so called experts told us we were responsible for global warming. But then, when temperatures started dropping, scientists began referring to these variations as climate change. When did temperatures drop? Temperatures have risen every single year. This is the most frustrating thing. Like, the conservatives are so cucked by the oil and gas industry that they're literally denying science. They're literally denying science. Every single summer, it's a record summer with temperatures rising all across the world, even by 2015. This was written in 2015. It's been proven by then that the ice caps are melting, water levels are rising, and every year is hotter. 2024 is the hottest year on record. And what do you think 2025 will be? It's so frustrating. So frustrating. Anyway, now these experts can't figure out whether it's getting too hot or too cold. Nobody says that. No scientist says that. Okay. Rodman says your webcam is good on my end. Thank you, Rodman. Once again, guys, it is not about my face. I know I'm a sexy, handsome, melanated black man who is very smart, educated, and is providing free education to all of you. All of the stupid Trump dick suckers out there never even read his book. I'm literally reading the book for y'all for free. So you're welcome. You don't need to see me, but you can thank me. So say thank you, Simon. That's all. Anyway, now these experts can't figure out whether it's getting too hot or too cold. So the new term is extreme weather conditions. That covers everything from boiling heat to frigid ice. However, the point is the same. By sending the byproducts of burning fossil fuels into the atmosphere, we have supposedly changed the natural weather patterns. In his 2015 State of the Union speech, President Obama declared the biggest threat on the planet today is climate change. The biggest threat, we have ISIS troops chopping off the heads of innocent Christian missionaries. We have a coalition of adversaries in Syria supporting a dictator who uses chemical weapons on his own people. We have millions of Americans who have mortgages greater than the value of their property, while the middle class incomes are stagnant and more than 40 million citizens are living at poverty levels. And our president is most concerned about climate change? Yes, 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 because literally it would make living on Earth inhospitable for all of us. Yes, it is a major, major issue. All right. All right. Rodman says the planet is effed. They are trying to control the panic. Totally disagree with that. Totally disagree with that. The planet is not totally effed. We still have a chance to make our world better, to save the planets. While some things might be, irreversible, right? We can still mitigate what could happen in the future by reducing our carbon output now, right? All right. Commando 21 says, it's all BS, Simon. It's not. It's absolutely not. Is the earth getting hotter? Whatever trailer park you live in, Commando 2021, I'm sure it's sweltering inside. In Texas, they're putting out weather warnings saying that extreme heat will lead to death for some people. Every year, more and more elderly citizens die from extreme heat. Okay, I don't think it's a myth that the world is getting hotter. If it's not getting hotter, take a look at the highest recorded temperature from 2023, 2022, 2021, 2020, etc., and look at 2024, and you'll see that the Earth continues to get hotter. All right, it's not a myth. All right. Commando 21 says it's 65 degrees here. That's because he's living in an underground bunker, because he's one of those right wing nuts who lives out in the woods underground thinking that the world is going to end. Right? That's probably why it's 65 degrees here. It's not 65 degrees anywhere in America right now, unless maybe you're in Alaska. Um, Anyway, continuing here. Continuing here. If you go back in history, you'll find that the biggest tornadoes we've had in this country took place in the 1890s, and the most hurricanes occurred in the 1860s and 70s. Violent climate changes are nothing new. We have even had ice ages. Oh God, this is really bad. This is really bad. I just don't happen to believe they are man-made. You don't have to believe it. You got to know it. You got to know it. It's a common understanding. Okay, it's a common understanding that the earth is getting hotter. This is not a conspiracy, Trump. This is not a conspiracy, Trump. Anyway, I do agree that the so-called global climate change is causing us some problems. It's causing us to waste billions of dollars to develop technologies we don't need to fulfill our energy needs. President Obama introduced a program known as Cap and Trade, which sets a ceiling or cap on annual carbon dioxide emissions for companies. This would have forced them to reduce those emissions or pay a tax for the excess released above their cap. Because we could not get this legislation through the Congress, he has had his minions at the Environmental Protection Agency try to impose this plan through rulemaking. This plan has succeeded mostly in doing one thing: keeping oil at an inflated price. Even after oil has dropped to $50 a barrel, we still live with prices at the pump that are too high. The truth is, we have sufficient energy supplies in this country to power us into the next century. All we have to do is develop them. Among all the gifts that God gave to America was an abundant supply of natural energy. According to the Department of Energy, the natural gas reserves we have in the ground could supply our energy needs for centuries. For example, the Marcellus shale fields lying under New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia could produce the equivalent of tens of billions of barrels of oil, giving us plenty of time to develop sensible and cheaper alternative forms of energy. So fracking, yeah, let's do fracking, right? Let's tear up the mountains of Pennsylvania trying to break rocks until we get oil. And oops, we caused an earthquake over, I don't know, Pittsburgh. You get what I'm saying? This is crazy. This is crazy. Um, yeah, Commando 21 says that's what you're saying, that the world is going to end. Oh, God. Oh, God. Oh, this is really dumb. Commando 2021 makes me lose brain cells. He literally has 21 brain cells. I swear to God, after this, I can't read any more MAGA material because this book is making me stupider. It's making me frustrated, and the MAGA dick suckers being in here is really dumb. Rodman says science deniers. Yeah, the denial of science shows how far the party of Lincoln has fallen. The party of Reagan has fallen. Denying science, right? Denying science, literally in their face. Anyway, right now we are greatly dependent on oil. The cost of energy is one of the driving forces of our economy. Job creation is tied directly to the cost of oil. The more it costs to get it out of the ground and to the consumer, the fewer jobs that are created in all the industries that run on oil. We don't even know how much oil is sitting buried under our feet as you read this book right now. Researchers at Rice University in Houston, Texas, have estimated we have 2 trillion barrels of recoverable oil, enough to last the next 285 years. Technology has changed so much in the last few years that a Goldman Sachs study has estimated that by 2017 or 2018, we could overtake both Saudi Arabia and Russia to become the world's largest oil producer. The oil is there for the taking. We just have to take it. I've never understood why, with all of our own reserves, we've allowed this country to be held hostage by OPEC, the cartel of oil producing countries, some of which are hostile to America. For the last few decades, the leaders of OPEC have been sitting around their conference table, setting the price of oil and laughing at us. They know we have no leadership and will pay whatever price they conspire to create. For years, I've been urging our politicians to have the guts to bust the OPEC cartel, but then I remember something else Twain said. Suppose you were an idiot, and suppose you were a member of Congress. But I repeat myself, Mark Twain was funny as hell. And Mark Twain was so funny. He was funny, man. We so Rodman says in the comments, we a new fuel source. Oil is ancient. I believe Rodman is trying to say we need a new fuel source, and I agree. We need to invest in solar power. We need to invest in geothermal power. We need to invest in wind power and all that sort of stuff. Oil is ancient, and just by the fact of this alone, Trump is going to deny science that putting carbon in the atmosphere is making the Earth hotter. Let's say I agreed with him on that. Let's say, hypothetically, I agreed with Trump that all the cars driving on the road are not making the Earth hotter. At the very least, I think Trump would agree that the carbon emissions from the trucks and factory cars all around, it's understood that all that carbon, all those emissions from cars does cause cancer in our lungs and in the bodies. So are we going to deny that investing in clean energy that doesn't produce those sort of outcomes would be a bad thing? At the very least, for public health, investing in clean energy would be better than having this dependence on oil, taking all this money from the oil lobby just to continue to shell out these stupid ideas that misinform the public. That somehow, because we had a lot of tornadoes in 1860, the Earth is not going through radical climate change caused by human action. It's really dumb. Commando 21 says, no oil, no country. No oil, no country. Really retarded. Really retarded. Anyway, continuing here. We can't be fooled or lulled into a sense of security by the current drop in oil prices, which is unpredictable and still insufficient, given the out there. Those oil prices are like the weather, guaranteed to change. We need to be prepared to drill our own oil, and we need to take advantage of every opportunity, including approving the Keystone XL pipeline. It's an outrage that Obama has delayed and probably even killed the 1,179-mile-long pipeline that would carry oil from Canada's tar sands to Nebraska, where it would connect to existing pipeline that it would take all the way to Texas, and at the same time create thousands of construction jobs. The excess of oil on the market, which has caused a great drop in prices, has made it seem less vital today. But eventually the world will need that oil, and we will need the good jobs that it will create. One of the main criticisms of the pipeline has been the possibility of oil spills. Even the State Department has said the pipeline will be safe and far better and safer than the existing system of transport. But mere possibility shouldn't prevent progress. You prepare for these situations, taking as many precautions as possible. And when they occur, you clean them up. We need to expand our own sources of oil because the Middle East, our largest net external source, is becoming more and more unstable. We still need Saudi Arabian oil, although we're less dependent on their products than we were only a few years ago. But Saudi Arabia is a main target of one but Saudi Arabia is a main target of, or in some cases, the home of terrorists. Given the Saudi over-reliance on oil exports and their lack of a sustainable economy outside of oil, they are probably going to need our help at some point to stay in business. That's a real threat, which is why we need to reduce our foreign oil dependence considerably. Our first priorities need to be approving the Keystone XL pipeline and starting to drill everywhere oil is accessible. There has been a big push to develop alternative forms of energy, so-called green energy from renewable sources. That's another big mistake. To begin with, the whole push for renewable energy is being driven by the wrong motivation. The mistaken belief that global climate change is being caused by carbon emissions. If you don't buy that, and I don't, then what we have is really just an expensive way of making the tree huggers feel good about themselves. The most popular source of green energy is solar panels. They work, but they don't make economic sense. They don't provide enough energy savings to cover the cost of installing and using them. They are the most highly subsidized form of green energy in America. Some estimates claim it takes as long as several decades after installing solar panels to get your money back. That's not exactly what I would call a sound investment. Even if the number is only half right, what kind of investment do do you make that takes 20 years before you break even? I understand solar energy is eventually going to become more efficient and maybe even cost effective. Maybe. When it proves to be affordable and reliable in providing a substantial percent of our energy needs, then maybe it'll be worth discussing. Meanwhile, we have to keep our cars and trucks running and our homes and buildings heated. There are much more efficient, cost effective, and reliable ways of doing that. It's no secret that I've had serious personal issues with the supporters of wind turbines. For several years, I battled the Scottish government over its plan to construct a really ugly wind farm consisting of 11 giant turbines right offshore of one of the most beautiful golf resorts in the world in Aberdeen. God, Trump is literally a super villain. He is literally a villain. Like, God, he owns a golf resort. Or he's an avid golfer. He took more golf days as president than any other president in history. And his thing is like the Scottish people want to build wind turbines to generate energy for their homes and families and stuff like that. And he's like, no, it's ugly. It's going to ruin the property values of the golf course in Aberdeen. That's some supervillain evil ish. That's horrible. He's really dumb. He's really, really dumb. All right, Commando 21 says, if you don't think we need more oil, you're insane. Yes, we need to continue to pollute the environment and pollute ourselves, right, by putting toxic gas in the atmosphere and breathe it in. Yes, Commando 21, I'm sure in West Virginia, underground where you are, the coal mines have done a great service to your health and to your father's health, to your mother's health, and all those people who die at 45 from lung cancer. Windmills are terrible, says Commando 21, and expensive. Yes, but building mega $1 million oil rigs off the shore of Louisiana that explode and then pollute the environment, yeah, that's not expensive at all. Inexpensive. Anyway, continuing here. The Trump International Golf Links Scotland Resort in Aberdeen is a great tourist attraction that will benefit the Scottish economy and create jobs, while these turbines destroy some of the great beauty of the world. There isn't sufficient wind power anyplace else. To me, this policy never made sense. Even at its peak output, the Scottish government was going to have to spend millions of pounds a year subsidizing this wind farm. We held up the project in court for almost 5 years. What a horrible person. This is one of the most. This is what a horrible person. This rich asshole owns a golf course. The Scottish people are like, we want wind turbines. The government approves it, and they're trying to build it. And this asshole is like blocking it from happening because he thinks it's going to lower the property values of his golf course. What a dickhead. Anyway, we held up the project in court for almost 5 years, and during that time, the price of oil fell so dramatically that this project no longer makes economic sense. So it is never going to be built. I did Scotland a big favor, says Trump. Okay. Like other countries, Scotland is trying to completely fulfill its energy needs from renewable sources within the next decade, but there is considerable skepticism about the plan. Bill Gates said flatly in 2015, renewable energy can't do the job. Government should switch green subsidies into R&D. The cost to generate that much power from solar and wind energy would be, he said, beyond astronomical. He told the Financial Times that the answer to supplying our future energy needs is going to come from technological breakthroughs yet to be achieved. Gates said he intended to invest as much as $2 billion in renewable energy research, but not in the development of wind and solar energy. There are a lot of questions about the damage that solar and wind power do to the environment. A recent study reported by a British think tank concluded that wind energy is inordinately expensive and ineffective at cutting CO2 emissions. Not only that, it added, wind power backed by conventional gas-fired generation can emit more CO2 than the most efficient gas turbines running alone. And building these steel monsters, mostly in China, causes many pollutants. Ironically, at the same time the wind farm in Scotland was going ahead, a similar project was denied approval in Doonbeg, Ireland, where I am building another beautiful resort. The plan there was to spoil the lavish views with 9 413-foot turbines. That's like lining up 9 vertical football fields, including both end zones. Fortunately, this plan was denied because the turbines might harm the estimated 7,000 freshwater pearl mussels, an endangered species on the European Union list, that were living in the Doonbeg River and also be bad for tourism. This magnificent golf course resort, absolutely one of the best in the world, was offering huge benefits to the local economy. We were saved by mussels. The bottom line is that we are going to remain dependent on oil and natural gas to fill our energy needs for a long time in the future. So, if we are going to become energy independent, we need to keep drilling. The good news is that we have tremendous supplies of fossil fuels. We just need to decide to go after it. We need to use every cost effective method we have available to retrieve these resources. That includes fracking. For those who don't know, fracking is a technology that involves injecting fluid into shale beds at very high pressure to free locked in resources. It makes it possible to recover vast amounts of oil and gas that otherwise can't be reached through traditional methods. While New York Governor Andrew Cuomo has banned fracking, this technology has created an economic boom in North Dakota, Pennsylvania, and Ohio. There were many jobs created and less unemployment in those areas than practically anywhere else in the country. Upstate New Yorkers would like to replicate that boom in their region, lower taxes, and pay off massive New York state debt. The bottom line on energy is that until there is a better alternate or green way of supplying our energy needs, we must put our resources to work for us now. Okay. Uh, so much. So it's so crazy, right? He's talking about in this book, green energy creates more CO2. That doesn't even make sense. And you said a British think tank. Cite the think tank. Why didn't you say the name of the think tank? This is the biggest problem with Trump's book. The biggest problem as we're reading Trump's book, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, he is not citing his sources. Most Americans don't read. Hell, most Americans who are tuning into this live stream right now are not even listening to the text that Trump wrote himself. They're not even paying attention to what he's saying, which is a big problem. But for the literate Americans who actually want to break down Trump's point of view, understand his policies, understand his agenda, he is not even citing his sources to make it easy for us. He wants to obscure the fact that he's reaching for the most wild things from the most right wing people he knows that are in his orbit to just put out there. A British think tank, who? The British equivalent to the Heritage Foundation that just wrote something in a report. They find some right wing guy and pay him to write some report just because he has a PhD. We're supposed to follow it. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. This is really bad. And the fact that his biggest problem with clean energy is just the fact that windmills will make his golf resorts probably lose value is really sickening. Like, this is super Levin. This is super villain level behavior. Trump acts like a true like bad guy in like a DC universe. Trump is Lex Luthor. He is literally Lex Luthor. He is like, we don't need green energy because we had a lot of tornadoes and hurricanes in 1870. And that's proof enough that the earth goes through wild climate change that has nothing to do with us, nothing to do with our mass factories that produce so much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, even though every reputable scientist agrees with this. It's absolutely insane. I'm going to go into the chat right here. Ozzy says Kamala is winning this November. I believe so. I believe so. Trump is low energy. Low energy Trump is all we're seeing in the media. Rodman says good morning to the chat to Ozzy. Okay. Rodman says coal is dead. Yeah, we should not be fracking. Like, what this is, fracking is like one of the worst things you could do to the planet. Like, one of the worst things we could do to the environment. And just because it's booming in North Dakota, who here wants to move to North Dakota? Who here wants to move to North Dakota? Nobody, nobody, nobody. Rodman says China has no arguments, and that's why they are better at infrastructure builds, moving towards the future. Okay, so I like that Rodman agrees with the Communist Party of China. I guess a unified Communist Party can get things done. So very interesting how my how my comment section is now turning slowly left wing. Slowly left wing. Rodman is feeling. Rodman is a fan of the Communist Party of China. The People's Republic of China is doing a good thing because they're unified in building infrastructure. All right. Commando 21 says, we have scrubbers on the plants. It's safe. We need gas, oil, and coal to survive. No, we don't. No, we don't. No, we don't. It's literally killing us. It's literally killing us. Saying that we need gas, oil, and coal to survive is like saying we need tobacco to breathe better. Saying we need gas, oil, and coal to survive is saying like we need alcohol to make our livers stronger. That's just a really bad and dumb argument. We've been able to develop other clean sources of energy for a long time. for a long time. And the fact that we have not progressed enough to move towards the next stage of our human development, past the age of industrial production, where we were just pumping oil and gas out of the earth, shows that we are beholden to the capitalist class. It's major corporations. Let's keep this a buck. The Republicans 20, 30 years ago were not beholden to the oil and gas companies like this. It wasn't until the oil and gas companies donated a bunch of money to the Republicans that they started towing this line, saying that, yeah, oil and carbon dioxide, they're not causing climate change. It goes to show how far people are cucked. Commando 21 is cucked by rich billionaires who wouldn't give a crap about him. Literally, one right in his face. Trump doesn't give a shit about his own followers. Doesn't give a shit about his own followers, and yet and still they are so cucked. It's such a shame. It's an embarrassment, honestly. I don't know how you, as a man, I don't know how you can be a man and say, yeah, I know the earth is getting hotter. I know that people are dying from breathing in carbon dioxide. I know that everything is getting worse and worse because of how we are extracting natural resources from the planet. Yet and still, I will believe the propaganda that comes from rich billionaires who are miles and miles away from my problems because what? I imagine myself being them one day. All right? It's so crazy. I don't know how you can be a man, look in the mirror, hold your testicles, and say, yeah, you know who I follow? This rich billionaire who doesn't even pay his contractors. This rich billionaire that stopped an entire nation from building windmills because it would have hurt his golf resort. How do you, as a man, look in the mirror and see Trump and say, yep, that guy has my best interests at heart? That makes you a total bitch, like a capital bitch. Full on bitch. You are bitch made looking at this motherfucker saying, like, yeah, he identifies with me. He's representing me. He wants the best for my children and my grandchildren because he wants to drill oil out of the ground, frack Pennsylvania because because what? Because of what? Because of what? Just to make his rich buddies at Shell and BP richer. What a bitch. You gotta be a whole bitch to stand on that sort of business. Anyway, continuing here, Rodman says it's all about his resorts in Trump. Yep. Facts, facts. Anyway, chapter 7, healthcare is making us all sick. Let's hear what Trump has to say about healthcare. Anyway, the basic difference between the politician's way and my way is that I've actually had to do things that politicians only talk about doing. I've hired thousands of employees. I've had to negotiate with contractors and unions. I've had to provide health care coverage for my workers. I know what the real costs are. I know what the problems are. I know what works and what doesn't work. Most important, I know where the waste is and how to provide good medical coverage at reasonable costs. Politicians don't want to hear the truth, nor do they want to tell you the truth. They're total hypocrites, especially when campaigning for re-election. They love to take to the stump and condemn reckless government spending and government waste, and yet virtually every bill passed by Congress is loaded with special goodies for their districts. We call this the pork barrel approach, which is a real disservice to pigs who are only eating to survive. The pork barrel in politics is creating government waste in order to reward some special donor or interest group, or to mollify a cranky member of Congress in return for his or her vote. And we're paying for it. I get very angry when I think about how our Affordable Care Act was rammed down a lot of sore throats by the Democrats. Even Nancy Pelosi, the Democratic House Majority Leader at the time, conceded that most supporters of the bill had not actually read it. Clearly, the public didn't understand what Obamacare was providing, its complexity, its concessions to the insurance lobby, its taking away of right to keep your current physicians, and naturally, the hidden escalating costs of healthcare, especially for state treasuries and businesses of all sizes. And for individuals who are young and healthy, there's no way out of it virtually without paying a fine. All right. Virtually all Republicans and a growing number of Democrats realize this already. This is already a disaster that will only get worse. Premiums are skyrocketing, up 30% to 50%, and that will only get worse. Look, I'm lucky. I'm able to afford the best health care in the world for myself and my family and my employees. I know that, but I also know that most people can't do that and need some help. This is a subject that has been really important to me for a very long time. There's no question Obamacare is a catastrophe, and it has to be repealed and replaced. And it was only approved because President Obama lied 28 times saying you can keep your doctor and your plan. a fraud, and the Republicans should have sued and meant it. As the different provisions kick in over the next few years, individual deductibles are going to continue to rise. People will have to get hit by a truck to be eligible for coverage because these deductibles are going to be so high. Medical people hate it. Doctors are quitting all over the place. I have a friend who is one of the best doctors in the country. You would know the names of many of his patients. He told me, Donald, I've never seen anything like this. I can't practice medicine the way I want to anymore. I have some accountants and computer programmers working for me than I have nurses. I have more accountants and computer programmers working for me than I have nurses. He's right. There are now more than 100 codes for doctors to get reimbursement from insurance companies. We've turned the quote unquote paperwork or computer folders in our medical system into the same nightmare as our 80,000 page tax code. As I've repeatedly said, the Unaffordable Care Act has to be replaced. When I differ from what others say, as usual, is in the way I would change it. Many years ago, long before anybody else was talking about it, I knew we had to make changes in the system. I knew it because I saw what effects healthcare costs were having on the bottom line. I knew it because at that time we had more than 40 million Americans without any insurance at all, and now we are forcing part time jobs down the system. I said then that we needed to find a plan for everyone that was affordable, well administered, and that provided freedom of choice. You know, a plan that actually allows you to keep your doctor if you want to. At that time, I talked about a single payer plan, which in our then much less complicated system may have had a chance of working. But it was only one of several suggestions from a non politician at a time when many different concepts and ideas also were discussed. This was 15 years ago, but it still gets brought up a lot by other people. I guess they have nothing new to complain about. As usual, because they have no solutions of their own, they resort to gotcha politics, which gets us nowhere closer to solving the problem or any other. They are all talk and no action. The Affordable Care Act is a clear example of that. To succeed in business, you have to be flexible and you have to change with the realities of the world. The world has changed. I've changed. I don't think a single payer system makes sense anymore. If I did, I would say it. I wouldn't need anyone else to say it for me. Maybe a single payer system works in other countries. It works incredibly well in Scotland, for example, and maybe it would have worked here at a different time, but not anymore. So what can we do about it? There's no question we need real healthcare reform. We can't let Americans go without health care because they don't have the right resources. Sadly, that statement might cost me, but I still believe Republicans have big, beautiful hearts and want to help the poor and sick and can do so at the right price. I can't even imagine what it must be like to be sick and unable to go to a doctor. This only throws people back into emergency rooms that are overcrowded and inefficient already. The Census Bureau has reported that 10 million people have now been added to the system. We have to find a way to take care of those people who can't take care of themselves. I believe that very strongly, even if it costs me. I know Americans agree with me because wherever I go in Ohio, Florida, Iowa, South Carolina, and New Hampshire, when I say it, people give me a standing ovation. The real argument is how do we take care of those who cannot take care of themselves? How do we make sure Americans have access to good health care so that our kids get everything they need and that even people who can't afford the basic programs get at least reasonable care? To me, for politicians to claim that we have an answer to every problem is silly. When you listen to some politicians reeling off their prepared answers, you almost fall for it. They're so smart that they already have a solution to every problem, and it's always better than everyone else's solution. How convenient, but not for our country, because nothing gets done, nothing gets solved, and we don't win. What I hear is a lot of ridiculous promises from politicians about how they intend to fix everything. They're all experts, but nothing ever happens. They're all talk and no action. Most of them have gotten really good at saying absolutely nothing. They've all got some kind of program, but when you listen to them, you still don't know what they're talking about. My approach is completely different. I approach complicated problems such as how to provide healthcare for most Americans at a price we can afford the same way I solve the toughest, biggest problems. We should hire the most knowledgeable people in the world on this subject and lock them in a room and not unlock the door until they agreed on the steps we need to take. He is literally insane. He is literally insane. Literally insane. Rodman says a lot of people don't want change or progress for people overall. Instead, selfish gains are front and center. Facts. I mean, Trump is all about himself. thinking that he is the only one that can solve this problem with healthcare in America when very smart people were locked in a room to create the Affordable Care Act. Like what is he thinking? This literally makes no sense. He is literally ranting. The easiest way to solve the healthcare problem in America is to have a single payer system, universal healthcare like the Romney Care. Mitt Romney, a Republican in Massachusetts as governor, created basically universal healthcare for every person who lives in Massachusetts, or highly subsidized healthcare that allows people to be able to go to the doctor and not have to pay thousands of dollars out of pocket. But Republicans, by and large, want to look past that, something that's popular, successful, and basically is Obamacare 2.0 or 1.0, right? Because it was the original. It, it Instead, let's try to be continually cucked by the insurance companies who want to fight against the U.S. government at every twist and turn to make healthcare actually affordable to people. It's crazy. It's crazy. Republicans don't even like their own policies. They don't even like their own popular policies. They only like what the rich, powerful companies that donate billions of dollars to them want, right? Continuing here. A lot of the times when I speak, people say I don't provide specific policies that some pollsters has determined are what people want to hear. I know that's not the way the professional politicians do it. They seem to poll and focus group every word, but there's nobody like me. Nobody. I ask people to look at what I've done throughout my whole career. Look at how successful I've been doing things my way. So they have a choice. They can pretend some impossible solution is actually going to happen, or they can listen to the person who has proved that he can solve problems. I started in a relatively small real estate company based in Brooklyn and made more than $10 billion. I now live on what is considered the best block of real estate anywhere in the world, Fifth Avenue between 56th Street and 57th Street, right next to Tiffany's in the heart of New York City. That doesn't mean I don't have some ideas about the right approach to take. First of all, we cannot cut either Social Security or Medicare benefits. That's off the table. Those programs can be saved by growing the economy. Second, there are some simple changes that would provide real benefits. Okay, so I'm glad Trump doesn't want to cut Social Security like most other crazy, radical, fiscal Republicans or Medicare. That's a good thing. That's actually a good thing. I will give props to Trump whenever he actually says a policy that's right. By the way, he didn't repeal Obamacare. He got into office, made all these promises, had the trust of the American people vested in him, and he didn't get rid of Obamacare. He didn't change the Affordable Care Act. So what does that say about him? And he had a Republican House and a Republican Senate. Anyway, continuing here. As I've said, I'd like to see a private insurance system without artificial lines drawn between states. We need to get rid of those lines and let people and companies across state lines to purchase the best plan for them. The government should get out of the way and let insurance companies compete for your business. I told you he was cucked. I told you they're cucked. The conservatives let the insurance companies take care of it. The insurance companies have been doing it for a few years, and it's horrible. It's horrible. That's why people break a leg and end up having to pay $50,000 because the insurance companies are ruining it. Because they can charge the hospitals whatever and make your premiums whatever, and you have no choice. We're a captive audience as Americans. Continuing here. I have a big company. I have thousands of employees. If I'm negotiating for health insurance for my people in New York or California or Texas, I usually have one bidder in each state. Competition brings down prices. And the way the law is now, it discourages real competition between insurance companies for customers. They have virtual monopolies within the states. That makes no sense. It's very stupid and unfair for us. You know who loves a lack of competition? Those insurance companies who are making a fortune because they control the politicians, like you. Like you, Trump, literally like you. They've paid for them with their contributions, and it's a good investment from their perspectives. For our country, not so much. They give money to almost all the politicians. I'm using my own money, so I'm free to do what's right and serve the people, not the lobbyists. That's a lie. You get money from lobbyists. You get money from the corporations. That's why you have these talking points about, yeah, let's frack and let's drill, baby, drill. That's why you are saying let the insurance companies take care of it. Who do you think is paying for that? Anyway, nobody understands business better than I do. I swear to God, I'm gonna take a drink every time he says this sentence. This is like the fourth time just today I've read this sentence. Nobody understands business better than I do. Anyway, continuing here. Nobody understands business better than I do. You want better plans at you want better plans at a better price. Increase competition for customers. The government doesn't belong in healthcare except as the very last resort. The main ways the government should be involved is to make sure the insurance companies are financially strong, so that if there is a catastrophic event where they make some kind of miscalculation, they have the resources they'll need to handle it. What? What? If we follow my logic, our healthcare system and our economy will be well again very soon. Oh God. Oh God, this is really bad. This is really bad. How many more chapters do we have of this lunacy? This lunacy. I'll probably finish up with chapter 8 and we'll pick up with chapter 9 tomorrow. So chapter 8 will be the last one I'm going to read through today. But God, the climate change one, the insurance one, and the health insurance one were really bad chapters. Those were horrible, horrible chapters that just really reveal what type of man Trump is. And yeah, the stuff about China and trade deficits. I mean, no, I'm not an economist. I'm not big on that, but I just know, if Americans want to really punish China, we got to stop wanting cheap Chinese shit in Walmart. But yeah, let's continue with chapter 8. It's the economy, stupid. So, continuing here, all the pundits, just about everyone else, said I would never really run for the presidency. When I announced I was a candidate for president, some of those same people predicted it wasn't really going to happen. They were sure I would drop out of the race before submitting my financial disclosures. Apparently, they thought I would be embarrassed to admit that I was not as wealthy as most people thought. But after filing those papers, they found out I was worth much more. I'm rich. I mean, I'm really rich. I've earned more money than even I thought I would, and I've had some pretty big dreams. I hear politicians talk and they say things like, I was a constitutional law professor, so I'm an expert on the Constitution. Or maybe they say, I was on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee for 25 years, so that makes me an expert on foreign policy. They point out how successful they were when they were a CEO of a great company where they cut 30,000 jobs, many of which ended up overseas, thus making them experts on job creation, experts on sending jobs outside of America to replace jobs inside of America. I listen to these people talking about how they're going to fix our economy, how they're going to create jobs, how they are going to lower taxes and balance the budget. I shake my head and I think you wouldn't have even qualified to be a contestant on The Apprentice, someone who is a tough negotiator and a real leader. Sadly, the Republican majority doesn't possess the leadership or the negotiating skills necessary to pass a budget that would eliminate programs that ought to be entirely in private hands, or even eliminated completely. The only time they really stand up to Obama and then they fold is in the final days when spending authorizations are running out. Where were they this summer when the real work and consensus could have been developed? They're going to screw up the lives of millions of Americans and destroy our credit rating because they don't have the leadership skills needed to make our country great again and to look out for Americans. What we are confronted with is a mixture of bad management and bad politics. We need leadership in the White House that will keep government functioning while getting the feds out of all the areas where they don't belong. If the government is properly sized and properly focused, we won't need to go from crisis to crisis. We need to start with the United States Congress. We've had presidents, Lyndon Johnson for one, Ronald Reagan for another, who have managed to build consensus to get things done. When President Reagan fired the air traffic controllers during his 7th month in office, he sent a signal to the unions that they heard loud and clear. When President Johnson twisted arms to get enough votes for the passage of a civil rights bill, he took on the far left and the far right and threatened them in order to get his way. It can be done. President Obama is big on playing golf, but he doesn't play with the right people. Oh God, President Obama is big on playing golf, but he doesn't play with the right people. He should be playing with those smart people who can help our country, establishing bonds to get things done, and not just his friends. Believe me, I know how to use a golf course and golf clubs to make deals. The only things that work are having a clear point of view and knowing how to get your message across to the country so that the people support and understand your mission. This way, we're not divided and special interest groups cannot buy the outcomes they want and rip us apart. It all comes down to leadership. I don't think many people would disagree that I tell it like it is. When you see the coverage of me on television and newspapers and on social media, you'd have to agree that I get more attention for my opinions than all the other Republican candidates put together. Hopefully, that's respect and not pure entertainment, but it may be a little of both. I managed to blast through the ridiculous liberal bias of the media and speak right to the hearts of the people, or at least I tried. Even New York Magazine, hardly a conservative outlet, has given me credit on its cover for shaking up the status quo. Again, we're talking leadership. When it comes to creating jobs and straightening out our economy, I am the only expert who isn't talking in theory. I talk common sense and practical realism learned from the school of hard knocks. I've been there, done that, suffered through adversity, gone into debt, fought back, and came out on top, and much bigger and stronger than ever before. During the recession of 1990, many of my friends went bankrupt and never recovered. I never went bankrupt. Yes, he did. Oh, yes, you did, Trump. Didn't you have a few casinos go bankrupt? A few companies go bankrupt? Haven't you had to pay settlements and civil lawsuits to people from Trump University and Trump stakes? Anyway, continuing here. I never went bankrupt. I survived and learned so much about how to deal with bad times. Our country is going through a bad time. I get it, and I know how to solve it. I'm a fighter. Knock me down, and I come back even stronger. I love it. I've spent my entire life not just making money, but more importantly, learning how to manage my resources and share them with the thousands who have worked for me. To hear our left wing critics tell it, we need socialism to make this country move forward, and we need a president who can make up the rules as he goes along. If he can't get Congress to do something, he needs to rule by executive order. I say that's complete nonsense. The free market works, it just needs leadership, not dictatorship. Our government needs to employ a strong adherence to the Constitution and maintain social programs that inspire and reward achievement that are constantly accountable for their spending and outcomes. I'm very concerned about the 46.5 million people living in poverty and the great majority of middle class Americans who can barely afford their homes or have lost them. I am very concerned for the people who can't pay for the education of their children. In short, I am concerned for the people who can't buy into the American dream because the financial programs of this country are so tilted in favor of the rich. That's why one of my strongest ideas is to look at the tax code in both its complexity and its obvious bias towards the rich. Hedge fund and money managers are important for our pension funds and the 401k plans that help millions of Americans, but far less important than they think. But financial advisors should pay taxes at the highest level when they're earning money at those levels. Often, these financial engineers are flipping companies, laying people off, and making billions, yes, billions of dollars by downsizing and destroying people's lives, and sometimes entire companies. Believe me, I know the value of $1 billion, but I also know the importance of a single dollar. The money I've earned was a result of my own work, projects I created, deals I made, companies I bought and turned around. I understand what it means for my employees to work in construction, one of the toughest and most dangerous jobs in the world. Those who spend their days sweating at their job should not have to sweat about their lives at night. I've never had the security of being on the government payroll. I was the guy who made out the payroll. It hasn't always been so easy either. In the 1990s, the government changed the real estate tax laws and made those changes retroactive. It was very unfair, but I fought through it and thrived. It absolutely killed the construction industry. It put a lot of people out of business. The misguided passion of environmentalists today makes building anything much more difficult. Now we have crazy overregulation. You can barely buy a paperclip without being in violation of some governmental policy. It's no surprise that stress in our society is at an all time high. Let good and fair minded businessmen and businesswomen run their companies, especially small businesses, without so much interference. Then they can make more money, put more people to work, and not just part timers forced in by Obamacare, and have happier lives for themselves. Right now, this country is in serious financial trouble. Our national debt is more than $19 trillion, and we're on our way to $20 trillion. Even the most liberal economists warn that as we head past the $20 trillion debt levels, we'll be in big, big trouble. That's when our financial system really starts to falter and diminish our borrowing capacity, as well as drive up the interest costs on our debt. That's when we will lose a lot of credibility in the world markets. For the past year, the United States has been the one country that has maintained financial stability while Europe and Asia faltered. Our debt is a very dangerous burden to carry around. There are overwhelming numbers of Americans who have not participated in the economic growth of the past year or of the past 20 years for that matter. They are being forced to mortgage their dreams, their American dreams, just to maintain where they are, just to get by. They have little or no hope of getting ahead. This is a case where our system is broken and we need to fix it. We've got to do something to change the way we're developing policy, and we've got to start right now. We need people who understand the scope of the problem and how to turn the ship of state around. We need leadership. Some of the proposed solutions make no sense. There are politicians who think one way of reducing the national debt is to cut Social Security or other entitlement programs. We have to tread very carefully there. Since our Great Depression more than 80 years ago, America has always provided a social safety net for those who fall off the economic chart. Retired seniors, in particular, rely on pensions and Social Security as well as Medicare. We have to be very careful about changing the rules for those whose monthly checks make a big difference in their survival. A lot of people live from check to check. There's no way I'm letting those payments be reduced. No way. This country made a deal with our citizens. That's their money. They paid it into the system their whole working lives so that older people could get their monthly checks. Now it's their turn. We should not touch Social Security. It's off the table. But you know what? There are a lot of wealthy people who don't need it. So if the government offered me the opportunity to give it up, I would check that box. I'm sure there are other wealthy individuals who would do the same thing. Even so, the impact that would have on solving the financial crisis we face would be minimal. I'm pretty sure Trump spends his Social Security checks. I am more than certain Trump gets his Social Security check and he spends it. Spends it like on a KFC binge, like on Air Force One or something, like on the golf course, new clubs, new cleats. I'm pretty. That's so crazy. He is a billionaire fighting this hard for Social Security. I am more than certain he gets his Social Security checks and he goes crazy with it on Amazon shopping for like new ties and stuff. Anyway, changing the tax code is to be more fair for all income classes is a much better answer to this bigger problem. There are certainly entitlements that can be reviewed for waste and misguided direction or wasteful execution. I discuss immigration policies elsewhere, but I question whether illegal immigrants or their children should be receiving the same benefits as bona fide citizens or those who are here lawfully. At the same time, government largesse for many businesses and industries, entitlements for the rich, need to be examined. I am very suspicious of income supplement programs that seem to expand for industries with large lobbying teams or for companies run by major contributors to election campaigns. To solve our overall economic problem, we have to start rebuilding our industries to meet the challenge from foreign competitors and create real jobs. Government statistics are made to look very positive, but in real life, the situation is terrible. When you look at the unemployment situation, there are two very significant variables. One is the percentage of people who give up and drop out of the labor market. They aren't included in the unemployment sample. Our so called labor participation rate, those who have stayed in the job market, is the lowest it's been in almost 40 years. It hasn't been this low since President Jimmy Carter was running the country, and he presided over an inflationary spiral in which interest rates exceeded 20%. When you also take into account the large number of job holders who are underemployed, the real unemployment rate soars to the high teens or even 20%. I know many wise financial heads question the government's assessment of the job market and the statistics it puts out. In our daily lives, we see from our friends and neighbors that the job market is still very troubled as downsizing continues to be a popular buzzword for corporations trying to hype their stock. It's not just jobs that are being lost to other countries. We are seeing whole industries vanish overseas. Americans want to work. We have a great work ethic in this country. The problem is that when young people look for their first good job or who have lost their jobs look for new ones, they can't find any. The jobs aren't there. They vanished. I've certainly done my part in my businesses. I know how to create jobs. I have tens of thousands of jobs in my career. I have created tens of thousands of jobs in my career. Thousands of people currently work for me, and many thousands more are employed by my partnership. I'm involved in literally hundreds of companies, almost all of which are working beautifully and setting new standards and records. They include everything from a bottled spring water company to a vineyard. We manage ice skating rinks. We produce TV shows. We make leather goods. We create fragrances. We own beautiful restaurants. Of course, our bread and butter is our bricks and mortar or real estate. We own, build, manage, and or license many beautiful buildings of all types. There is only one thing that every single one of my many different businesses have in common. They all help provide jobs for people. When I construct a building or develop a golf resort, it creates jobs for construction workers and for all the companies supplying the materials from the flooring to the lighting fixtures. These are good jobs. When a building is finished and occupied, or when people are playing on one of my golf courses or staying at a hotel, We supply the service personnel who keep these businesses running. More good jobs. The same thing is true with having my products made in China or Mexico or other countries. Some have attacked me for urging that we complain about these countries. At the same time, I'm having goods manufactured there. My response: I'm a realist. I'm a competitor. Doesn't even live by his own word. Doesn't even live by his own word. Says complains about China taking American jobs and China selling us cheap products back to us, and we're suckers and losers. But he makes his products in China. Have some morals. Have some conviction. If you really are about America first, have everything you do be in America. But he's not. When I'm working on a business deal, I make the best deal. But we should be changing the business climate so that manufacturers can get the best deal right here in the U.S. Right now, it doesn't work that way. We need legislation that gives American companies the tax priorities and financial support to create more of their technology and to redirect more of that manufacturing here at home. Have to take a milk break. Ooh, okay. All right. We must stop certain countries from devaluing their currency at the drop of a hat. We're the home team, and we should come first. So, how do we get back to jobs we've lost to other countries? Answer: start by negotiating better trade agreements with our friendly partners. We have to bring jobs back from places like China, Japan, and Mexico. We have to stand up and be tough. In too many ways, we're giving away the greatest market in the world, the American consumer. Ford recently announced that it's building a $2.5 billion plant in Mexico. Nabisco is moving a big plant from Chicago to Mexico. A German auto company was all set to build a plant in Tennessee, but then it changed its mind and is building it in Mexico instead. How does that happen? How many good jobs did we lose in just those two deals? How many more deals like that have slipped through our fingers without ever realizing it? Hundreds, maybe even thousands, but no more. It's ridiculous. We all know that the American labor force is the best there is. We just have to allow them to compete. But we sit there while they're getting beaten in trade agreements. In my companies, we fight for every deal. We fight for the best price on cleaning materials for the restaurants and the best price for the printing of the labels on our wine bottles. I fight for my people every day. Now I'm going to fight for America. I want our country to start winning again, and we can. All it takes is a commitment to winning and making Made in America a badge of honor, just like it used to be. All right, well, that's the end of chapter 8 on the economy. In our next live stream, possibly tomorrow, we will be reading chapter 9, and we'll possibly read up to chapter 13 or so. We'll read about 4 chapters next time we have our live stream. But this is a pretty crappy book, pretty bad, makes no sense, sort of meandering all over the place, no sources cited, no real information. Uh, the insight into Trump's mind and how it works this deep is something that I wish I could take back. God, I wish I could take it back. Why did I decide to do this series? I'm kicking myself right now. But I hope my right wing fascist audience enjoys this. I hope y'all are enjoying reading the words of your dear leader. And yeah, if you have any other books that you want me to read, put them in the comments. I will try to cover them. After this book, we're going to be reading Kamala's book. Then after that, J.D. Vance's book. And after that, Tim Walz's book. And if we have time before November, we will try to read the platform of both candidates and their parties. So that would make sense. That would make sense to provide as much information for the people out there as possible. And also, if I can get my hands on it, we will also read Trump's book that he's dropping in September as well, because he's dropping a book in September. So I'll give that out to the people as well. So y'all be easy out there. My name is Simon Hill. Peace. Book React